G'day guys, ZiggyD here. Today I want to share with you guys a bit of a secret. I have been working on a unique item for Path of Exile. Not that big a secret. A lot of you guys already know about this because I've talked about it on stream quite a few times now. But a couple of months back, an anonymous fan donated to me, not $1,000, but they donated to me their designer unique that they had. So they bought a supporters pack for Path of Exile, and they didn't want to design the unique with it. And they liked an idea I talked about on a podcast one time for a unique idea that I had. And they wanted to see it, realized in game. So they decided to donate that designer unique to me. So thank you, anonymous donator. I really appreciate it because it's been very exciting to work on. But basically, my core idea for a unique, before we even get into talking about how this is being executed and how the current state of the design of the unique is, because it is still a work in progress, my original idea was, I really like and I really romanticize the idea of the new Path of Exile player, the beginner Path of Exile player. I love that idea of a new player coming into Raycast and discovering all of the things that this world has to offer, and then taking that knowledge and using it and then benefiting from that in game. I love when you acquire this piece of knowledge and use it in game and you feel like a real badass. Like you absolutely destroy something. You destroy a boss, or you get through a zone, or your character becomes very strong in one way because of this extra knowledge that you've managed to gain. So I wanted to create a unique that highlights that concept, that really focuses in on that. So kind of this idea of knowledge to conquer, which is kind of, I guess like an unofficial motto for me and my channel and what I'm all about, this idea of knowledge to conquer. So I had some ideas, and basically it sort of stemmed from this idea of knowledge was tied into something else I really liked in game, or it was really realized well in game, with this idea of resistance ring swapping. Early on in the game, and for the leveling process, sometimes even a little bit later, if you are about to approach something that has a certain type of elemental damage, you can go to the vendors, or you can get out of your stash a resistance ring that suits that situation. The idea of changing up your gear to suit the upcoming situation. That takes advantage of knowledge and rewards knowledge by easier progress. So a really good example is when you're creating a new character, when you're racing, for example, when you're about to fight Merveil, if you have that knowledge that Merveil is cold damage, so you've learnt this. You've learnt this from previous experiences or from talking to people. Then if you go back to the vendor, or if you pick up some iron rings and convert them to cold resistance rings, if you put on 2 cold resistance rings, the fight becomes a joke, becomes super easy. And that is that idea of knowledge and then reward for that knowledge. I really love this resistance ring swapping, and it's like an idea that's realized in this game of this knowledge to conquer that I really like. So I wanted to create something that's sort of around this idea of resistance ring swapping. So let's jump on over here to some a little bit of artwork. Thank you rnghell.com for the item generator. Here is the beginning of the idea. Here's the original idea. We have -50 all resistance, so this is an unset ring, and Rory has said that I will be able to do a low-level unset ring. I don't know how low level, but I do want it to be as low level as possible, because I want this to be something that will potentially affect new players or low-level characters. So, it starts off with -50 all resistances. That's terrible! Why would you want that on your unique? Ugh, gross! Well, I really like the idea of power with drawback. The unique design in Path of Exile often encompasses this idea really well, and I wanted some of that action, but it also suits this other idea of resistance ring swapping. So, I had this idea, and I was talking to Rory originally about having a ring that you could set its status alignment to be resistant to one particular status, and originally unset rings didn't exist in the game. So the idea was that we would take a ring, it would drop as a random elemental type, so it would be more resistant to fire, cold, or lightning. And then you would take it to the vendor, trade it with a gem, and you would get another version of the unique back. However, in practice, this means like a lot of extra sort of fiddling around, and it's less intuitive and stuff like that. It requires extra knowledge of the vendor recipes, which is kind of cool in its own right. But when unset rings were released, I was like, that's perfect. We've got to use those. We've got to use those. So this is the original design. This is the first part of the unique. We have -50 all resistances, and then 150 extra fire resistive socket with a strength gem, 150 extra cold resistive socketed with a dexterity gem, and 150 lightning resistive socketed with an intelligence gem. I get confused between cold and lightning sometimes. I think that's right. Doesn't matter. That's besides the point. Also, the numbers are also besides the point. Don't pay too much attention to the actual hard numbers on this, because there's going to be some sort of balancing. I've been talking with Rory, and we'll have to figure out a point where there's a good economy of resistances. So something that early on we'll be able to max out resistances, but you'll be affected by the penalty, which these numbers feel okay for that. But late game there will be a drawback to using this in terms of resistance economy, but you can build around it by maxing out your 2 other resistances with other gear, and then using this to give yourself a lot of extra resistances. So the numbers need some tinkering, but this is the idea. You find this ring, you get a blue gem, you're about to fight Merveil, you stick a blue gem in it. Your fire and lightning resist are all the way down, probably in the minuses at that point early in the game, but your cold resist is insta-capped. Insta-capped. Insta-75 cold resist. So you go fight Merveil, it's a joke. Later on, going through Chamber of Sins, hell, there's a lot of lightning damage in here. Let me just check my stash. Oh yeah, I got a lightning gem. Put it in the ring, capped lightning resist. Oh, yes, so good. It's that resistance swapping. You could even keep 3 gems in your inventory and just switch them out as you like. This is like the core idea. So this will have, I think, a really big impact on like leveling characters. That'd be a pretty cool leveling item. Could be a little bit OP in races, maybe. We'll see. But it's not something you can use all the time, because a lot of zones have mixed elements, and it requires some intelligence. And if you do go to use it all the time, you have to be aware of the drawbacks of it. So that's got that real cool like feeling of knowledge with it. And if nothing else, it'll inspire players that pick it up, new players especially, to think about look at this item and think, what would this be used for? What's the point of this? This idea of switching a resist. So, hold on, I get a lot of one resist. Maybe then their mind starts thinking about this idea that sometimes prioritizing certain resists is important. So, that's the original design, and that might not blow you away, but I think it's a pretty cool idea, and it's what I want in a unique. Screw you guys. But it captures a lot of what I really love about the game. So, I didn't want this to be it though. There's a few more spots for affixes. You can have about 6 affixes on a unique, and this doesn't really have too much to offer to endgame, really. Not really too much to offer to endgame. So let's expand upon it a little bit further. Now, I want to talk first about an idea I had originally that we've scrapped. We've since scrapped this idea. The first idea was to have it also affect maximum resistances. So you would get minus maximum resistances, so -5 all max resistances. And then when you're equipping a certain alignment, maybe you'll get +5. So when you have a strength gem in, you get +5 max fire. Now, the obvious problem with this is righteous fire. It's a balancing nightmare. Righteous fire is a balancing nightmare. Anything that you add that tinkers with maximum fire resistance needs to go through the righteous fire balancing test, and +5 maximum fire resist or something like that, or even +1 is a bit of a balancing nightmare for righteous fire. So it also adds a lot of affixes. You'd need at least another 3 affixes, maybe even 4 affixes to this work, and having a massive long list of affixes on a unique is something that Rory said they try to avoid as much as possible. They only have a few items that have more than 6 affixes. So we didn't really want to do that. And then there's other problems with like the strength of these resistances, and the minus and positive max resistances didn't really affect the early game player that found this. So there's 2 players that might use this unique, and the early game player that finds this wouldn't care about the maximum resistances. It's just kind of added confusion for no real reason. So we scrapped that idea for obvious reasons, balancing nightmare and all that jazz. And I was talking to my stream chat, and it was Xcodes, one of my viewers, who suggested why not having it something like supported gems or supported by enhance. And I got to thinking, I was like, that's a cool idea. But what about if it's enlighten to have this idea of knowledge? You can level up your gems. So I took this idea to Rory, and he actually goes, what about this? Oh baby! Socketed gem has elemental equilibrium. This is what Rory suggested to me. Now, I had thought about something like this a while back, before even designing this unique, but I thought the devs would never go for that. And then Rory suggests it to me. So I'm like, oh, Rory, what? Really? You would let me do this? You would let me do this? I'm like, no way. Okay, if you think you can get this through, I will be so happy for this to be on the item. So, he said, I can't promise anything, I'll go talk to Carl. He went and talked to Carl, and Carl's cool with it. Carl thinks it's an alright, cool idea. Now, this comes with the provision that it will require balance testing, and Rory has said they won't be able to balance it test it until a bit closer to 1.2 or in 1.2 when some of the people working on 1.2 coding are available. Maybe there's some changes happening that might affect it, don't know, but generally they don't have the time to work on this and get it in. I didn't really expect it to be in before 1.2 anyway. But what is this elemental equilibrium business? Some of you guys might not actually understand the point of this and why I think this is crazy. Elemental equilibrium has the drawback sorry, let's take a step back. Elemental equilibrium is a keystone passive that when you hit a monster with an element, it makes it more resistant to that element, but far less resistant to other elements. So if you fireball a monster while you have elemental equilibrium, they will become wow, I'm blanking. It's like 30% extra resistant to fire damage, and then minus 50% resistant to lightning and cold damage. It's very, very potent. However, it only works in some builds, very niche builds. Works on things like summoners if you're using Arc to proc at lightning, and then you know, your zombies are dealing fire and cold damage. The zombies will deal extra fire and cold damage, so that works pretty well. Otherwise, people use it with things like discharge builds, where you use Lightning Nova or something to proc elemental equilibrium and reducing their resistances to fire, and then you do one big single hit to finish them off. Or you do it to sort of make the burn more effective, because degen effects don't proc elemental equilibrium. So, for example, my Righteous Fire character used an Ice Nova to proc elemental equilibrium, and because Righteous Fire deals fire damage, it gets the damage bonus, but it doesn't proc elemental equilibrium itself because it doesn't actually hit enemies. So the real problem with elemental equilibrium has been it's not very usable in a lot of builds, because if you use it on something like, let's say, my Arc build that I've been working on, if you use it, you cast a Fireball, they become less resistant to lightning. That's good. And then you cast Arc. That moment you cast Arc, everything becomes resistant to lightning. And the way you work with Arc is you're attacking very quickly, you're casting very quickly, you hit them with lots of little arcs. And that happens for pretty much all. Imagine something like Dual Strike, attacking very rapidly with set elements. Basically, the effect is that elemental equilibrium in most builds means that you're always getting the negative effect of elemental equilibrium. Everything just becomes 30% more resistant to your attacks. So elemental equilibrium is flat out bad in most builds. However, an item like this, where elemental equilibrium is contained to one item, means that you could cast Arc. Let's say you're playing a Fireball build. You could cast Arc, and then everything becomes more resistant to lightning, but less resistant to fire. And then you cast your Fireball, but the Fireball doesn't have elemental equilibrium. So it hits, it deals extra damage, but it doesn't proc elemental equilibrium. The mobs maintain indefinitely this negative resistance to fire and cold. So it's basically a very potent curse for two elements, and then it makes them stronger versus the other element. So that's potentially very strong, so it's going to require some balance testing. I feel like that's why I didn't suggest it in the first place, because I thought it would be too overpowered, but Rory and Carl are interested in it. They're interested in testing it out, so I'm very keen to see if this makes it through, because if it does, it's so perfect for this item, right? Yes, the core stats, like the beginners, the things that affect beginners, are the resistance changing on yourself. You get minus all resistances and then positive one resist. It's kind of like elemental equilibrium on your personal character, you know, yourself. And then you have elemental equilibrium on other monsters as well. It's kind of this master of the elements style thing, while also capitalizing on knowledge. By the way, the flavor text is just something I made up now because I think it's funny. But I don't know the name of this unique or the flavor text. I'm going to leave that to the writers, or the art. I'm going to leave this to the writers and designers at ZiggyD, because I'm hopeless with that sort of thing. But this is the current state of the unique, and it is very much a work in progress. It's going to be something that we continue working on and continue balancing back and forwards, and it could be, you know, a month or two before it goes in. So anyway, I'm keen to hear your thoughts on the design of the unique. Do you think this is a pretty cool idea? Do you think it would be super overpowered? Do you think it would be not that bad? I'm curious to hear your guys' thoughts, but I'm very excited to be designing unique, and it's been fun also seeing how the unique design process works firsthand, like actually talking to the developers and you know, shooting these ideas back and forward. And it is a long process. It takes a long time for these things to become balanced and designed, and then eventually get implemented into the game. Anyway, that's it for now. I'm ZiggyD, and thanks for watching.